Judy. Do you want to get us Andrew? Hmm?
He had dinner.
What?
He had dinner.
Bill, Will, I see it's 6:30. You want to give your welcoming spiel?
Well, you're on mute.
That's good because I made a fool of myself. All right, so welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, welcome, and we're happy to have you here. You'll notice that you're muted, and you're going to stay muted throughout the duration of the meeting. Following each presentation, and as we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and pressing the raise hand button there. It's not the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. If you press it more than once, your hand will go back down, so we ask you only press it once. If you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. If you're, be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or any presenters as we move through the agenda. They'll never see those chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll want to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we ask that you do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we might not be able to see you. So if you're having problems, chat me. I'm here to support. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Barry and Felice, and they can get the meeting going.
Good evening. I'm Barry Schneider, co-chair, and Felice Farber is the other co-chair. And I'll turn the meeting over to you at this point, Felice.
Thank you, Barry, and welcome everybody to our joint Parks Department and Environment Committee meeting tonight. We're pleased to welcome Jessica Otney, who is the New York Director of Policy and Strategy at the Nature Conservancy. The benefit of having these meetings on Zoom is we can get folks who are based in upstate New York to come join us. And Jessica is going to tell us about efforts for the Environmental Bond Act. So thank you, Jessica. And Will, if she can share her screen.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you so much. You are all so well organized, and I'm so pleased to be here with you. Thank you Felice, for inviting me, and to all of you for giving me some time to share some information with you. So Felice asked me to speak to you about an exciting measure that's going to be on this year's ballot in November in 2022. So I'm just going to share some information about the measure itself, and then also about the effort that is underway to communicate with the public about it and grow support for the measure. And happy to share more or take questions in the chat, however the organizers like to run the meeting. So this year, we have a historic opportunity to infuse funding from New York State government into protecting our communities from the impacts of climate change, reducing pollution that causes climate change, and protecting natural resources. This is going to be the largest New York Bond Act ever proposed at $4 billion. Governor Hochul recently released her budget proposal and is seeking to increase it by $1 billion before it goes to voters. And it will be used for programs that our communities need right now and that will help us leverage federal infrastructure funding as well as local funding. So it's a very exciting time that the state is proposing this investment. And I'll tell you more about each of these programs in just a second. Something notable about this is the first time we've done this in a bond act in New York State. In order to mirror the state's climate law, there's a requirement that at least 35% of the funding be dedicated to frontline communities that have been disproportionately impacted by environmental pollution. And there's actually work underway right now to make that 40%. This is something we're really excited about, and making sure these communities benefit from this funding. So the first category that the Bond Act will support if voters pass it in November is water quality improvement and resilient infrastructure. And you can see here some of the types of projects that this funding will go towards. There is a large, more than $4 billion fund already for water infrastructure upgrades in New York State. This will add to that, as well as dealing with some issues that are happening on our coasts in places like Long Island to the Finger Lakes with harmful algal blooms, replacing lead service lines, which is a big issue for a lot of our cities across the whole state of New York, and eliminating discharges of pollution directly into our waterways. So $650 million for that. It'll also support open space conservation and recreation. I know I spent a lot more time in the outdoors during this pandemic, and at the Nature Conservancy, we saw about 300% increase in visitorship to our preserves. I know New York State Parks saw similar crushing numbers, frankly, as did New York City parks. And so, we need an infusion of funding to make sure not only we can create new parks in places that don't currently have them, but also that we can make sure the infrastructure in those parks is able to allow people to safely access nature and recreate. This will also support funding to conserve the state's farmlands, making sure that our cities like New York, like our upstate cities, have access to healthy local food. It'll also support projects that reduce the pollution that causes climate change and helps us deal with the climate change in our communities. $1.1 billion will be spent for energy efficiency, greening buildings, as well as projects that reduce heat, which is a deadly impact of climate change, through green roofs and community gardens, cool pavement, and cooling centers. It'll also support urban forestry. And it'll help us leverage New York's vast forests and working lands to store carbon and reduce pollution. And finally, the last and fourth category is for flood risk reduction and natural resources restoration. I think y'all in New York City saw an incredibly devastating situation with the storm Ida hitting in the fall. And we know the state keeps getting hit by these storms over and over again now, more frequently than ever. This will help us upgrade infrastructure to make it more resilient to climate change. And it will also allow us to protect the natural systems like wetlands that protect us during these extreme weather events. So this is very important funding. And again, big leveraging opportunity here for the federal funding that was recently passed in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I'll just note this is also a huge job creator. This Bond Act, we are about to release some new data, but AECOM just did a study a year ago on the $3 billion proposal, which was the previous proposal for this, and it quantified that it would create 65,000 jobs in New York State. And that obviously that number is higher now because it's a $4 billion measure. So we're building a big coalition to support this. We want to make sure that people get the good news and people start to learn about this Bond Act so that they can support it when they go to vote in November. And you can see here, there's a website, cleanwaterandjobs.org. We're bringing in organizations from all different sectors to support this. And we're also really encouraging people, everyone in the public, to reach out to their state legislators. So right now, this has been proposed in the state budget, the increase to $4 billion, and writing letters to your legislators in Albany and making sure they know that their constituents support this measure is very important. And so that's something we're encouraging everyone to do. We're also encouraging organizations, and it can be any kind of organization that's interested in this. It doesn't have to be an organization like the Nature Conservancy. It can be community groups, church groups, PTOs, whatever you're involved with, to take a look at the website. And if you're excited and interested, you can join the coalition. There's an email there. You can sign up and get more information about the measure. And I did just want to take one other second, since I'm talking to such a great group from New York City. We do have a New York City program locally in the city. And we've kicked off a really exciting partnership also that's focused on expanding the urban forest in New York City. It's called Forest for All NYC. And my partner, Emily Maxwell, is our New York City director who's running this. I also wanted to make sure you had the information about this effort, which the website's right there, Forest for All NYC, so that you can check this out. We've mapped where our forest is in New York City. And we know that in order to sustain New Yorkers in the future, we need to expand our urban forest and reap all those benefits that our forests and our trees bring to our neighborhoods. And so this is an urban forest agenda that has been put together by more than 50 organizations working across New York City and within different neighborhoods in New York City to work to advance policies to expand and protect the urban forest. So I'd encourage you all to check that out. And this is the exact type of work locally that the Bond Act will actually be able to support if it's approved in November. So with that, I'll stop, and Felice, however you want to handle any questions.
Thanks, Jessica. I really appreciate you spending the time tonight. And if I didn't mention it already, we're presenting this tonight in cooperation with the Environment Committee on the Public Works, on the Community Board. So Barbara, you have a question?
I do.
Comments?
And thank you so much for doing this. I'm co-chair with Lynn Strong of the Environment Committee. Thank you. This was wonderful and of course deserves great support. I have a question. Is there, besides forestry, are there other things that you would think was really for our CB8 area? One of the things the Environment Committee was asked to do is to work with other committees to see what we as our community, how we could make suggestions that would affect climate change, particularly after Ida. Do you have, is there any way of looking and seeing what really would affect our area or Manhattan specifically or so on?
Yeah, sure. And I can always follow up with you, Barbara, to share really detailed information on the language and where this money is going. But things like municipal stormwater system upgrades, which, and not just sewers and drinking water pipes, but also our stormwater systems. And in addition to the gray infrastructure, working to do green infrastructure projects and stormwater retention projects, which is very important. So that, I think, steering right into that kind of Ida flooding rain event standpoint, that would be one. And then also projects on climate change to reduce emissions or pollution that's causing climate change by upgrading buildings with energy efficiency.
Oh, my
and SUNY and CUNY are specifically called out there too, as well as citing renewable energy on buildings. So there's a lot there. And then again, there was that whole section about urban forestry, which is, we're excited about it because we care about nature, but obviously there are huge needs in the city, and especially in certain neighborhoods that are really devoid of the trees that they need to provide cooling to people in the community during those deadly heat waves. And so I could foresee a significant amount of support from that landing in New York, and hopefully landing in these communities in particular that don't have that nature to support them.
Thank you. Thank you, Felice. You may be hearing from us too much. Thank you. We really do appreciate that. And Felice, I guess, would be the link to you, that we will be getting. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Barbara. Next is Dylan and then Tricia.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks, Jessica, so much for being here. This is really exciting. I'm wearing my Green New Deal sweatshirt for the occasion. So my question is around kind of allocation of the funds and decision making. So does it go directly to the different cities and municipalities and they decide how to spend the money, or does it go to organizations like yours, or is it kind of a mix? How does that work?
It definitely doesn't go directly to the Nature Conservancy. The way it works is the money will go to state agencies. So in a lot of cases, it will go to the Department of Environmental Conservation. There are some programs that direct funding, for example, to the Department of Agriculture and Markets for farmland protection. There is a buyout program that would be for people who are living in places that are flooded recurrently and need to get out. And so that would be administered by the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, because they have that expertise. So again, I can follow up with Felice and send you all a chart that shows exactly where each program funding goes from state agencies. And then the legislation also shows what kinds of entities state agencies can grant funds to. So for example, the stormwater money will be a municipal grant program. So municipalities would work with DEC to submit an application, and then they would be granted funding. So it would also be competitive, which makes sure that everyone can be at the table in the mix, and it's not going to a list of certain communities. And then, as I said, there would be 35, hopefully 40% that would be spent in these environmental justice communities, or actually the definition we're seeking for them to use is disadvantaged communities, because that's the exact definition in our climate law. And those communities are being mapped through an inclusive process that's being run by the state's climate justice working group for the Climate Action Council. So there'll be a map of communities. So the nice part about the Bond Act too is that there'll be a reporting requirement. So the public will be able to see annually where the money is going and how the money is being expended. And so there's a transparency element of this that's also going to be very important and useful for local government entities and advocates like you all, so that you can be at the table for that.
Thanks. Now, Tricia, the past co-chair of this committee, if we can unmute Tricia.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me, and I apologize. I'm just in transit, but I wanted to try to make this meeting, and I'm so glad that you guys have this presentation. My question has to goes back a little bit to what Barbara was asking about. Of course, my interest was piqued even more when you start talking about stormwater capacity and dealing with our sewage and kind of below ground infrastructure. New York City in general has just some of the worst outdated kind of stormwater treatment situation that goes back to over 100 years. And basically at this point, if it rains more than a quarter of an inch of water, we are dumping raw sewage into our waterways. So I'm wondering if you could just go back bit more.
Tricia, you just got cut off.
And realistically, what would we be seeing coming to New York City specifically?
Sorry, you got cut off. You're just asking what would you realistically see from the stormwater funding coming to New York City?
I think that's her question.
Okay, I mean, as I said, first of all, I will say on the water infrastructure side, there's a $4.5 billion fund that was created outside of this bond act for clean water infrastructure and drinking water infrastructure in New York State. It's called the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. And advocates have been focused on getting those appropriations in the state budget for several years together since 2017. So there's already money for this. And it's administered by the Department of Environmental Conservation and Environmental Facilities Corporation. And this funding would flow probably through that program. It's a competitive grant program. So New York City needs to be aggressively putting in the applications for that funding to the state and working with the state to make sure that that funding is also coming to the city. And, I can go back and take a look at where that money is going, but this would all be based on a grant program. And so the city government needs to be making sure that they're working with DEC and putting those applications in so that money is coming to the city. I'll also just say, as a former Buffalo resident, I feel your pain on your combined sewage overflows. And, they have wooden sewers in some places still, I think, up there. So that's a real issue across all of our cities in New York State. It's a serious problem. And it's something that, I think a lot of people are really more focused on now that we're seeing these major rain events. It's happening more and more.
Well, so now that a former CB8 member, Rit Argawala, is the city's chief climate officer and new commissioner of DEP, we can reach out to Rit and make sure he's aggressively applying for this funding, as I'm sure he will be. Thanks. So next is Lynn, the co-chair of the Environment Committee.
Hi, everybody. So I've got kind of a more unusual question because I represent Roosevelt Island as part of Community Board 8, and we probably have, per Community Board 8, the most amount of green space in Community Board 8. But I have to say that over the years, after advocating really viciously for trees on Roosevelt Island and additional park space, is there room for us greedy park wanters that we've got a place here on Roosevelt Island that's currently a parking lot that we've been begging them to turn into green space. And initially they agreed to do that, but because of some of these other issues and new things that are happening, we may lose that. And how can I continue to get like a space holder for keeping that to be a potentially green and additional park space? Because I have to say, we already do have a lot of park space here. I'll readily admit that, but I'm greedy when it comes to trees and park space, and we'd love to see that parking space turn into parkland. How do we get funding for that?
Yeah. So like I said, there's $650 million in the Bond Act for open space conservation, including farmland, as well as recreational infrastructure. So again, I think your first point of contact on that issue specifically would likely be the city park system. But this is a place the New York City parks can go for funding to do projects like that. And I've been on your great island, and it's an incredible and really unique space. So that's an exciting idea.
So just to kind of flesh it out for you, at the north end of the island, we have a nursing facility.
Yes.
That behind it is a huge parking lot that we did some arm twisting and got them to at least consider turning that into additional park space at that end of the island. And it's my understanding that they're planning on going ahead with that, but to get that state agency directed to where they could get some extra funding may help facilitate that turning into a park a whole lot faster. And before they have any other ideas on what it could turn into, that would be super awesome. So we're not really part of the city when it comes to, I would think, getting funding for that. So I'm just trying, how do I direct the people at that?
It would be a state parks project, you're saying?
So the REOC, Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation, is a state entity. So I would think that they would have to go through the state to get funding, is my guess.
Yeah, they would. And that's something I would talk to your legislators about that right now, because they're in the process of going through the budgeting process. So if there's, a local funding that they're going to be able to move, that might be a place. There might be, something in the budget for the corporation specifically. And then also I would say talking to the regional folks at New York State Parks would be important, because there's also $200 million in this year's state budget. This is not the Bond Act, but there's a Parks Capital appropriation of $200 million this year. And that's an increase. And so another strategy would also be speaking to the state parks folks about seeing whether a portion of that $200 million could be applied to create this park here.
Now, I know in the past, we were able to arm twist them into getting, when you did like tree allotments for state places, and we've been trying to get a necklace of cherry trees around our island as like making that as like a special thing for us. And so we're kind of close. We've been able to add like 120 trees within the last, I think it was 15 years, cherry trees. So is there, I'm just trying to help figure out how I can facilitate and direct them to the right people to make the ask so that we can continue to do some of these things that's made the community unique.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would, it would be great. Maybe if I can drop my email in the chat, and that way maybe we could follow up on some of these really kind of detailed hyper local things. And then I can search around a little bit and see if there's someone I can help connect you with.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Next is Judy Schneider.
I'm sorry, I was helping Sheena get on, so I missed the presentation. I'll have to watch it and rerun. But did anyone ask if we can have this sent to Will, or does he already have it?
Yes, I have a copy of it. I don't recall whether I sent it to Will, but I will.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a copy,
Oh, thank you.
closer to home.
And anything else, Judy? Okay, and next is Barbara.
Barbara, you just muted yourself. You were already unmuted. Oh. And hi, Teddy.
Great, thanks. I know that a lot of the green space, a lot of the new designs are much more conscious of greening and climate change and so on. Will your bill say that you have to use certain materials and do something in some sort of a specific way to make sure that it's environmentally correct? I think that there's ways of working with the soil and green space and so on to make sure. Is that something that's taken into consideration when monies are allocated?
This bill puts money into a lot of different programs, and so
Right.
It wouldn't be good to have a kind of one statement for all, right? Like, so if you're working to improve soil health on a farm, you're going to do something differently than when you're designing a park playground or, et cetera. So we would really have to take a look at the programs and the way the agencies that are administering them. A lot of this funding is flowing into, the stuff that's not great infrastructure. There's a lot of environmental restoration funding in this Bond Act, and it would flow specifically for environmental restoration and benefit, as well as moving forward projects that are listed in existing kind of regional or community-based plans, things like estuary plans. So like the Harbor Estuary Program, projects from that could get funding, or restoration plans for natural resources. Barbara, I think that's a great question. I think it's also a question that we would have to take a look at the individual program.
Yes, I think so. But would that be one of the checklists to say that has to be done? Thank you. Because I know things are emerging every day. There's something new and a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and if we put it in the legislation now, and this takes 10 years to spend, all the things that we think are great now might be different in 10 years too. So
no, I wasn't thinking of saying you should use this soil. I was thinking of saying that one of the judgments is the most up-to-date, environmentally correct, whether it's for green space or for gray infrastructure or whatever else. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so I think we have one final question from Lexi.
Hi there. I think I'm actually waiting on the conversation about the parks. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Thanks. So I think that's all we have on this. I really appreciate you coming, Jessica. This was terrific. Thanks for educating the community board about this really important issue. I know it's March 31st is the deadline for approval of the budget, and hopefully there'll be an extra $1 billion in this bond act that'll be on the ballot in November. So thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Felice. My email's in the chat, and I'll probably come back to you all at some point or email Felice with something for you all during the campaign phase. So thank you so much for your time.
Good. Great. Good to see you, Jessica. Thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation. We'll be seeing you more often, I'm sure. Thank you. Moving the agenda, the next item on the agenda is a 2022 review of the community's activities in 2021. We are going to talk about New York City parks, the EDC, and the Central Park Conservancy, and the Tramway Plaza. Can you? Yes. Okay, let me move very, very quickly. The EDC has control over the East Midtown Greenway and the annual Haswell Green Park Phase 2B on the Esplanade. Currently, the caissons are being drilled and concrete is in place along the East River at East 54th Street. The pedestrian bridge was in place on site on January 4th of this year. The demolition of the existing platform for annual Haswell Green has continued, and the contractor has installed sheet piles. The topside soil replacement and deck buildup has begun, and we have invited representatives of the EDC to join us in the early spring 2022, either in a March or April meeting. They will make a full presentation. The other part of that, if they come in March, then the Department of the EDC will come, and I'm sorry, the Parks Department will come to us with a full presentation on the Esplanade from 96 to 59th Street. So we're going to cover that area very thoroughly in the next couple of months. And now I turn over to Felice, please.
Thanks, Barry. So in terms of the repairs to the location for the New York Crew facility, the Parks Department expects to have the Army Corps of Engineers permit shortly. That's essential to advance the project, and that will allow construction to begin in early 2023. We've talked before about repairs to the 72nd Street cul-de-sac. Manhattan Borough Commissioner Castro will be visiting the site tomorrow. As we know, construction has begun and the John Jay Park is underway, or we had the groundbreaking, and it's expected to be completed in September of this year. And finally, OMB issued their approval for the Green Streets project at 66th Street, and that project is on track to be out for bid in the spring.
Great, thank you very much. And the last item to cover is oh, I'm sorry, as the Conservancy.
Sure, I'll talk about that a little bit. So the Harlem Mir Center, the demolition of the Lasker Pool and Rink is complete. Site work, including construction of utility infrastructure and excavation, will be continuing through the spring. Construction of the new facility will be underway by summer, and they're on schedule for the pool season by 2024. The dairy, which I think will, if you have some pictures to show, the project to restore the dairy building and construct an accessible route to it was completed this fall. And the Dairy Visitor Center and gift shop reopened in November. Conservatory Garden construction began in January on the comprehensive restoration of the garden's hardscape and infrastructure. It'll progress in phases over the next 2 to 3 years. As for the Kinderberg chess and checkers, they're nearing completion of the public review for the restoration of the Kinderberg and renovation of chess and checkers house. They anticipate beginning construction this spring and completing the project by the end of 2023. And we expect to have the Conservancy come talk to us about the restoration and renovation of the operations facility, public restrooms, and recreation courts at the North Meadow Center. And that, I think, should be in the March meeting.
Great, thank you very much. And the last item for the update from 2021 is the Manhattan Aerial Tramway Station is being constructed in 2 phases. Phase 1 is the east elevator that opened to the public in October, and they're now working on the second elevator, phase 2. They're finishing up the electrical and architectural metalwork. The job site trailer has been removed. The site cleanup will commence next week. The overall completion of the project depended on the regulatory sign-offs by the city, but they are working with Parks Department to potentially open the park before the end of March. We've also inquired of them to how, in their restoration, will they be restoring the sidewalk outside of the park that they damaged as they brought their heavy vehicles over the very delicate landscape. So we'll get an answer to that, and we'll have that back next week. Regarding this presentation of what we did in 2021, you can come, if you missed any of it, you can come back and watch the video, which is on the community board's website, or the details will be in the minutes of the meeting, which are also posted on the community board website. I see we have a number of hands up. Barbara?
Just quickly, what is Green Street?
Oh, Green Street is the city's DOT Parks joint program to transform areas in the city where you have trees growing on an island, and the city has now, with the Department of Parks and the DOT, taken that over, and they are now monitoring it. And we secured some funding some time ago to upgrade some of the streets, particularly one on East 66th Street.
So basically a maintenance program, or creating these islands?
No, your islands, this is maintenance of those islands.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Great. Wonderful work that was been done over the week.
Yeah. I want to welcome Tricia back. Apparently she's completed her journey and she's now landed in a domicile. Welcome back, Tricia.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about the bad connection before. Just a couple of questions, and it's really good to see you all. Just a couple of questions for you. So who, you said that the Commissioner Castro is going to come, or somebody from the Parks Department is going to come visit the 72nd Street overlook tomorrow?
Yes.
Is there anybody from the community board who's going to be joining that meeting?
I cannot make it tomorrow. We learned this very late this afternoon, Tricia, just 2 minutes before 5 actually, and I have a family commitment tomorrow that will not allow me to participate. But I will be in very deep contact with the commissioner to find, before and after he leaves, to find out what his assessment is and what his plans are going forward.
Okay, obviously the masonry is really problematic. You have on one side of that cul-de-sac, you have a building whose shareholders have paid for the masonry work to be done on their own, and then on the other side it's just in crumbles. And then of course we were part of the kind of group that helped redo the benches there ourselves. So the benches are done. Although they are beautiful. They're maybe not as slightly as professional as maybe would have been done if the Parks Department had actually committed to fixing the benches. But I think it would be really important to get their feedback on, the lighting is still a question, to making sure that masonry work is taken care of. And then long-term looking at who's going to really take care of that space. So if Barry, I know that you have that open communication. I do wish that we would have had like a presence there with them, just because it would be nice to have somebody who could walk through that.
Right. Well, Bill's been there. I'm sorry, the commissioner's been there before. He knows the condition that existed several months ago. And I think what he's doing now is we made it very clear what we want, the community wants, to improve this area to make it more hospitable. But I'm not sure what he's going to come back with tomorrow will be an assessment, and we will review that with him.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to flag for you guys is that I was on the Esplanade yesterday, and in the area that MSK is doing their work, so right below 71st Street, which is obviously right now closed off for repairs. It looks like a new sinkhole has come up. So we've been harping a lot on one that was underneath the bench, but there was a new one that came up that is over there, and they have it gated off. But again, it just, in thinking about the work that MSK is going to be undertaking to do for their building, it really makes me concerned about the overall structure underneath. It's very disconcerting to see these new pavers that they just put down not 5 years ago broken and sinking. This is not old Esplanade that we're talking about. This is like new work that they spent millions of dollars on in putting in, and they already have sinkholes popping up. So there's something going on in underneath, and I think it's really worth alerting folks. They must know about it because they've kind of chained off the section. But I know last year when we were talking about this, they kind of left it up. Excuse me, that's Teddy right here. But they left it up to, kind of left it open, an open-ended question about, somebody's going to have to pay for these sinkhole repairs. But, there are new sinkholes forming, and they're in CB8. So we need to, I think really be aggressive at raising these concerns.
Okay, well, I'll speak. Number one, I believe that building is the HSS Kellen Tower at that location, and I'll get Steve on the phone tomorrow morning and discuss the sinkhole that you're referring to.
Thank you. And then finally, we obviously are in John Jay all the time, and we see the work that's being done there, and we see that the pool is getting set up. It's probably not too early to start asking them to see if regular pool hours are going to be open up this year for John Jay. I saw work that's going to be done. And if this committee is thinking about future projects, something that we kind of discovered in the last few years was the fact that the area right outside of John Jay that everybody thought was a POP is not a POP. It's actually parkland, and it's not really, it's fairly outdated in terms of what's there. You have a lot of kind of hidden corners where, oftentimes you either see homeless or you see a lot of like recreational drug use or things like that happening in this area. It's not well taken care of, and so it may be worth this committee, really pushing. Sorry, this is Teddy singing happy birthday. It may be worth really pushing, reimagining this area and how it could be better integrated into John Jay Park. It is parkland. It's just parkland that's not really being used, or in my opinion, kind of just used to what its potential could be. So for future projects, as you think about John Jay and as that section gets done, we do have a whole section of parkland that's not being used really to the fullest.
Trisha, what area? Oh, go ahead, Barry.
I know that Steve has been concerned about the area. We've had brief chats, but nothing in depth. I'll explore further with him now. Thank you. Trisha, I'm sorry. Felice?
I was just wondering, Tricia, what area are you talking about right outside of John Jay Park?
Sure. So when you go to John Jay Park, before you actually walk through the iron gates, you will see some a brick plaza with a piece of public art in the center of it, and maybe 4 to 6 benches that are kind of tucked in between large hedges. That area is generally full of rats, but in the summer months, those kind of hidden hedges just lead itself to, a lot of kids basically partaking in just recreational drug use, or just, whatever, just hanging out or doing whatever. That plaza with the public art piece, everybody has kind of assumed that was part of Glenwood because it is right, it connects Glenwood to John Jay, but it's actually parkland. And thank you, Will.
That's it. Very good.
And so that's actually, it is actually, under the jurisdiction of parks. That's another area that has some broken pavers. And over the last few years, we saw some new trees being put into it, but it's really, I think, underutilized, and people definitely use the benches for sure. So you wouldn't want to get rid of those, but there is a serious disconnect between John Jay Park and this plaza. And maybe that's a good thing, but generally you see 2 different schools using that park. You see it's a huge resource in the community. The pool is obviously overwhelmingly used in the summertime. So in terms of just future projects, I would encourage the committee to think about how you might activate that space a little bit more and really advocate for funding for it. When we brought this to Ben Kalos, Ben Kalos thought, yes, that's John Jay. When we brought this to Ben Kalos, even he was surprised that it was a pop, that it wasn't a pop, excuse me. So it's just worth, as you think about 2022 priorities and 2023 priorities, and even as you start to think about the budget process, it's I think an untapped resource that we should really be thinking about, activating more.
Thank you, Tricia. I've made some notes and I'll be following up on that. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Rita? Well, let's go to members of the public before we go to board members. I'm sorry. Charles Whitman.
Hi, Barry. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was the overview. I appreciate it. That was you accomplished a lot during the year. And I wondered about when you mentioned the Esplanade project covering from, is it 66 all the way to 96? 81 through 84, which is the first phase of the Esplanade. Is that something that's going to be covered in the next 2 months? Is Parks going to be making a presentation on that?
I'm not sure, but it'll be included in their comprehensive review of the Esplanade. We'll target that. I know part of that is DOT, as you know, Charles.
Sure.
I'll be sure it'll be on our radar.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lexi.
Hi there. I just wanted to talk about Rupert Park. I'm not sure if that was going to be something that is on the agenda, but I saw that was supposed to be something that was being discussed. There's a plan to create a dog park there, and I have a child who's been attacked multiple times by large unleashed dogs. There's just a lot of dogs, and the people that have those dogs have organized into a collective and are now ripping down fences and essentially making it their own. I just wondered what the committee thought about this, and would like to know an update on the potential of creating a dog park. It is not a dog park. There's actually a lot of signs that very clearly say no dogs allowed, and yet dogs are actually on like the children's play equipment. We've got videos of that.
Lexi, let me interrupt you, please. We had a full discussion in January of the proposal by the Parks Department on the update of Rupert Park, and they presented 2 items, one with a dog run and one without. The committee voted in favor of the dog run. That'll be heard at the full board meeting next Wednesday, where it'll be voted on by the entire board. And that would be the time to ask your questions and raise your issues. But thank you. We're moving along. I see an Elizabeth. So, I can't read the name, but it's Elizabeth something. Elizabeth Sirna.
Yes, hi.
Yes,
Kapoor.
go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the collective, and I understand that that meeting is next week. I don't understand the fences being torn down. We were kind of curious as to why that had been done. We don't have to talk about it now. We had absolutely nothing to do with it. The dog owners had nothing to do with that, but I'll obviously defer to you and defer to that meeting next week.
Fine,
Thank
that's
you.
what's going to happen. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
We'll see you all then. Okay, Rita Popper hasn't spoken.
Hi, can you, am
Yeah,
I
we
on?
hear you. You're good.
You're fine.
Okay. I overlook Rupert Park, and I want you to know that what Lexi says is absolutely true. And even during the snow, the dogs used to be in one quadrant of the park, and now they're all over. And they own the park. I hope that the Parks Department comes back with a very good solution. We need it, and I look forward to next Wednesday to having the Parks Department present everything to the board.
Well, I'm not sure the Parks Department is going to do any presenting. They did the presenting last month, Rita. But you will have the honor, the chairs of the committee make the presentation on the vote that the committee took, which was in favor of the dog park. And they'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. This is the next Wednesday's discussion.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that the voices of both the dog owners and the parents of children are heard and understood, and it is not one over the other. It is not one better than the other, but to understand that there are areas in the park for children and there are areas in the park maybe for the dogs, and they're not in the same area. So I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
We should have a very robust discussion next week.
Yeah, I mean,
some people are actually looking forward to it. Thank you, Rita. Anything else you want to add before I move on? Okay, Barbara Rutter, please.
I just want to say I always get a giggle with you, Barry, so I really appreciate it. You always say something that makes me laugh. To go back to Trish's, I couldn't tell from the picture. Is she talking about the area behind the pavilion that we thought was part of the pavilion? Right. Well, I know there was always a question, was it pavilion or was it parks, and went back and forth. I think if it is parks, it's very good news, because then you have a definitive answer and know who could take care of it and so on.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. Nice group here today. We'll now move the agenda, which is the report by Sheena Kaufman, our district manager for the Parks Department. Sheena.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, speaking of Rupert Park, with the fencing, we're in the process of reinstalling some not better fence, but to reinstall the fencing back, because we were there visiting and some of the fencing is down. So we're going to reinstall it back, and close off the areas, the horticulture areas and the fenced off areas that were damaged. I'm just going to looking to get some more fencing of the same kind so we can match it up to be the same. Other than that, you mentioned the tramway. We're looking to open it in March 1st. So that should be some good news for us. And Honey Locust is on its way. Hopefully it'll be ready sometime late this year or early next year. Other than that, I have nothing else. If anyone has any questions, I'm willing to answer them.
Lynn? Community board member Lynn Sinizaki.
Hi, I'm Roosevelt Island representative to Community Board 8. So my questions are going to be focused on the Tramway Plaza. And I know that Barry has been working really hard to make sure that the park becomes whole after the construction is done. I want to say that I'm super excited for these elevators because we have a lot of disabled people in our community, and these elevators are going to be game changers for getting people in a good way into Manhattan relative to the elevators that had been there. And I've been riding I'm a tram rider. I've been riding it since the new elevator opened. They're amazing, and they are what we had hoped for. So we're super thrilled about that. But my question goes back to getting the park, once all the construction is gone, to be made whole again. And I know that there were some discussion, I heard Barry about the sidewalk repair. That's more of a REOC issue as far as I understand. But my concern is that the trees will be made whole for the few that were lost, that we get some trees back into that park. And so I just wanted to ask, was there a plan in place for that?
Well, usually when parks when we close down the area, in anything that was damaged by the contractors, the policy is for them to replace anything that's damaged. Before we accept it back over, we make sure that these things are put in place and we don't sign off on them. I wasn't here for this particular closing of the tramway, so I'm not quite sure what the specifics are, but more than likely, anything that was damaged, they must replenish before we accept it back over. So I'm sure that's what's gonna happen. I'm not 100% guaranteed on that, but almost that's what happens on all contracts when we accept it back over. So I'm sure Steve did a good job at, making sure that this was put in place.
Well, I know Barry's been a good watch person for these, so I'm just hoping that he'll let me help him facilitate making sure we're made whole again.
I shall do that. Thank you, Lynn. I'll be in touch. Thank you. I'm sorry, Rita, please. Well, she took her hand down. I'm making a note about tomorrow. Okay, yeah, now there's Rita's back. Go ahead. Would you unmute?
I happen to have breakfast standing at the window, because it is a pleasant thing to see every day. And I can tell you what is happening. Around in every quadrant around the tree, there's like a half circle. And that's what both the dog owner and the dog climb over. So, and the reason I want to protect an area is that kids were playing baseball, and they were playing in a quadrant where the dogs were running around. And I don't really think it's fair that they are running, where the dogs have been relieving themselves. So if you don't put the fencing up around those around the tree and that semicircle, that's how the dog owners and dogs are getting in. Not only that rickety fence that was in the middle that never went to the end, that's their dog run, but now they use the entire park. So I don't know if you're in a position to be able to fix it, or.
Well, we're gonna go to the main areas to fence off first with the materials that I have on hand, and anything else that's additional that if I can fence off, I will. But I don't want it to look so bad that we like fencing off every part of the park and not enjoying the beauty of this park.
Right.
Sometimes over fencing certain things, it doesn't look good. It doesn't make the area look good.
No, you're
our
right.
Our PEP officers are around and they're familiar with the situation that's happening at Rupert. It's a tough call because it's the dog owners and the people that don't want the dogs there. So we're trying to keep them in one little area because we know it's going to happen. We just don't want them all over the place. So that's what we're trying to prevent. So we're going to fix the areas first. And then whatever you think that you see that is crucial, that we had, once we're done, then we can speak about that on the later, at a later date.
Because putting the fencing up, as you just are speaking, I just realized that if we put the fencing up for the dogs, we're also putting it up for the kids. We don't want we want the kids to use an area, we want the dogs to use an area. We'd like them to use them separately. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rita. Next is Elizabeth.
No, I think that's a fabulous idea. We, as I said before, we don't know why those fences were cut down. And the problem with it now is that the area is not contained. A little bit of fencing or temporary fencing would be fabulous. Absolutely agree with that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Judy? And then we'll go to new business.
Yes, to continue on the same subject of the fencing. Sheena, is it possible not only to put up fencing for the area where the dogs should be, but also put up some signage in the park that says this is for the pets, this is the dog area? And that would also mean changing the signage that's outside the park at the moment that says no dogs allowed. Of course, we'd have to wait and see how this is voted on next week. But if the full board approves Plan B with the dog run, then I think we should look at changing the existing signage on the park, or covering over that part if it's approved that says no pets. And then after you fence it off, put up signs saying this is the only location where pets are allowed.
Correct. So we can do that because that's the best, because we can't have it to be a double standard. We can't give them tickets and then say we allow you to be here. So once next week's comes, you'll let me know how everything went, and if it's voted on, then I'll put that in motion. And I'll actually put that particular section in motion first, and then get the signage and then work on changing the signs and or just like you said, covering over it. So let's just do it that way. Just wait till next week to see how it works out.
If it passes next week, we don't have to tell you. Just look in the sky. There'll be fireworks. There'll be balloons going off. People screaming. Yeah. But okay, that's another story. Thank you, Sheena. Have a pleasant. Have a good month. We'll see you back in March. Okay. And now I turn it back to Felice, who will discuss new business.
Is there any new business? I think
Yes.
Friends of East River Esplanade wanted to make a presentation.
They were here. I assume they're still here. Yes.
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you so much for giving me the time. And I think Will had some pictures that just remind me. So thanks so much. So great to be here and hear all the activism. And some of the things that I'm going to touch on actually relate directly to what you said. For those of you who don't know us, we are Conservancy for the waterfront from 60th to 120th Streets. We spend a lot of time every day, literally advocating and planning to activate this waterfront. And we couldn't do it without Sheena, because I don't know how she does all these other parks. I talk to her so many times a week and meet with her that I don't know that she has time to get anywhere else. But just going sort of from south to north, you see up here is a photo of the Acoc Pavilion. And just to tell you, last summer and the summers during the pandemic, the garbage there was overflowing because the fabulous Parks Department couldn't even keep up with the use that it expanded. So our group actually purchased, and with the help of Sheena, we look onto the Esplanade 2 big bellies, which are the first to the East River Esplanade. We're really proud of those. We hope people use them. So that's one thing. Looking up, and you can kind of go through the pictures, Will. This is an issue we've come to you before with. The lawn, which was redone in a multi-million-dollar project that was completed late 2017, early 2018, but talking about parks, completion of projects with outside contractors, the water lines that went to this gorgeous lawn were actually never hooked up, the hookup. So if Will could go to the next slide. So over the course of the 3 years, it has become a dust bowl, that lawn. And we came to you about a year ago, or over a year ago, actually, with this. And I believe it was a full board resolution that said something should be done about the lawn. Meanwhile, we were working really hard behind the scenes with it. The Parks Department finally discovered that the boxes had never been picked up. Very, very long story short, we are working to privately re-sod this lawn ourselves, and we have a contractor to do it in time for spring, because it would be a shame to lose this phenomenal green space for yet another season. And Parks has now did Council Member Menon, and she worked with us and with the Parks Department and Commissioner Castro, and they committed to sodding this like the way they sod the baseball fields for the spring. I have a lot of concerns because there are still a lot of questions about how they're going to water it. I have personally gone to the 197A, the Phase 2B Skanska contractor. The foreman has agreed to throw up a temporary water line because now these water lines are shut off because of the construction down below. But we are hoping that your committee can, in the background, advocate. If you hear us, just say that this needs to be done by this spring, not another few years. So that's the lawn. If anyone offline like Barry wants, or Felice wants to come to me and I can give you more of this long, exhausting story, I'm happy to do that. So that's that area. In the meantime, we are planning to activate with our programming again, free music, free food. We're going to start in May, the first weekend in May. We'll give you more information about that. If you don't follow us, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we have an e-blast list that you can do through our website, so you don't miss out on any of these really, really fun events that draw hundreds and hundreds of people from the neighborhood. If you can go to the next slide, just going a little further north, having trouble at the dog run. You can keep going. At the dog run that's just north, the Andrew Haswell Green dog run. We've been there over the years, even though it's the newest dog run in the area. About poor drainage, muddy conditions. It's really was never paved over appropriately. And so we are working with Councilmember Menon and with Commissioner Castro and his staff to try to do kind of repaving and then getting a new drainage. You could stop there, Bill, because I'm going to go to that one next. Some repaving and drainage of that dog run, and we'll be coming back to you as that process moves forward. We've had contractors in this week to try to look at the drain and what's going on there. If you can go to the slide that has the signage on it, and that relates to what Trish was saying. She was referring to HSS portion that HSS is redoing as part of their Kellen building construction. And as part of that, an initiative that actually came a couple of years ago out of Community Board 8, saying that there's no signage, Esplanade, and signage extremely important on waterfronts and in parks. It's on other waterfront and in fact globally, not even just nationally. We work to design the historic, and we have approval from HSS to do it, and we are working with Parks again with council members to try to make sure. I know that the HSS project already came through CB8 and was approved by you, but we're hoping that this will be an addendum to it. This signage will have pictures of what the ad, and it's hard to see on here, but we have the rights to use the painting from 1850 of 6th Street and the waterfront. Came from the Mount Vernon Hotel and Museum. We have a photograph of George Hirsch running the first New York City Marathon in this portion of the Esplanade before it was changed to go up First Avenue. So it's a really exciting initiative. It's interactive and it has this map, and we're hoping that if it gets on, it'll be some kind of prototype. This is just a mock-up. So that's just for the committee, just like a little teaser, because we're hoping to move this forward. And I think some of the other pictures are showing what we're especially proud of, that our advocacy has led to $300 million, more or less, that's going to be used to redo the part of the Esplanade that's north of Carl Schurz Park. And that RFP, the bids were all, the RFP was submitted, all the bidders submitted their bids at the end of last month. EDC is expected to decide on who is going to be the project, the civil engineer team that's going to lead that project. And that construction is supposed to start in 2024. Excited about it. In the meantime, we're going to continue to do our programming and part on that section of the waterfront. I have a lot more to say. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or to email me at eastriveresplanade@gmail.com, or you can reach us through our website, esplanadefriends.org. So thanks for giving me the time.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Barbara, do you have a comment or question?
Besides, Jennifer knows I'm a great fan of hers, and thank you for all the work. But what about the exercise equipment, Jennifer?
Okay. I mean, I'm like, I am so exasperated by this. So, you know, the exercise equipment goes back to before the pandemic. That was an initiative that we had started, and that came out of, you know, my coming to community board meetings, hearing the public actually asking for it, seeing it all around the world. And then we thought the easiest way was to include it in the HSS project. I can't even go there, but essentially it has been kiboshed by, for the time being, Sheena, plug your ears, by the Parks Department, who apparently has told HSS, who was willing to pay for it and put it in there. We worked with a lot of, you know, all the vendors who are in the Vendex system. We one that gave us a mock-up for a small bit of it. And it has been, the short answer is it has been kibosh. You know, I haven't given up on it. You know, there are other sort of behind the scenes, possible other locations that are being looked at. In fact, by the end of this week, I know that HSS is working on, to Tricia's point, on the infrastructure issues. I know that because they have told me, the construction manager from HSS, that they're working with Parks this week and have heard about some of those infrastructure issues. And they're going to rediscuss the sign and the fitness equipment. And I'm supposed to get some kind of update tomorrow on that. So I haven't given up on it, but it is just like, it, you know, to use somebody else's expression of an piece of exercise I never want to find. It really is like a hamster wheel, and you know, it's a crazy thing.
Is there anything we can do? You don't think a resolution or anything that we can do to help you?
I mean, I feel like maybe if you say it again. I know there was a resolution already, and we brought it to the attention, for example, of the council member. You guys did a resolution saying you were in favor of exercise equipment about 2 years ago, and you did a resolution about the lawn. I actually found a Patch article about it from April of 2021, I think it was 20 or 2020, about the lawn. And it's still, so I actually have, I'm so sorry, but I actually have like the hydrants that were supposed to go underground to like hook up water for the lawn. I have them in our storage. They weigh like 75 pounds each. And I picked them up. And so, you know, would do it myself if I knew how, and would put this equipment in if I knew how, and it's just like I don't know. Anyway, we're still working on it is the answer. And maybe at another meeting, I could come to you and ask for a letter if I think it would be. And I will say council member Men has gone in partnership and has started to, you know, really facilitate communication with the Parks Department and moving things much faster. So that's a good thing.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Jennifer.
And next is Judy.
Jennifer, I didn't quite understand what you were saying about asking Commissioner Castro about the sodding for the lawn at the pavilion.
Okay, so this is, it's really boring. So
No, I don't want the long thing.
eventually, so the whole thing we're about to, because we're working on this literally for 2 years. We were going to, we have a landscaper that does the Rockefeller landscaping down below.
Let me be more specific, okay? You mentioned something about the spring. Now, what is it that you wanted the commissioner to do, or he isn't going to do?
So what he told me, I spoke to him last week. So he said he can lay out, I spoke on Friday, less than a week ago. So they can lay out the sod, like, you know, when you go into a baseball every year and they roll the sod out. But I think there was some misunderstanding about watering. So the hookups that we finally found that they can put in the final valves, those are now shut off because of the 197A2B down below. But the Skanska guy can throw up, he's a fabulous foreman. He can throw up a temporary line, and then, you know, those Elasco things, so like you don't trip over wires on the street, so they could lay that down. And then when we were gonna do it ourselves, our landscaper was gonna hook up, you know, multiple sprinklers so that sod doesn't die right away, because even sod needs to have some moisture. So they were going to hook up sprinklers on timers because it's a fairly large lawn. It's very unclear. I've spoken not Castro, but with and with Sheena, but also with like the, you know, who Castro referred me to, you know, like Brad Romaker, et cetera.
Yes, of course, he's in charge of that stuff. So why?
Yes. So I met with him in person. Yeah. And it's very unclear whether they're going to be able to actually hook up sprinklers on timers. They wrote in writing actually that perhaps volunteers could come in and water the lawn every day. And like a lawn, it's not like flowers where you can come with a hose, you know, a lawn has to be sprinkled or it's really going to just look as bad. So supposedly tomorrow get some kind of, I don't know if you heard anything else, Sheena, about that on your end.
Sheena, you're on mute. Will, can we unmute Sheena?
No, Brad hasn't spoken to me about it as of yet. We had another meeting earlier today, me and Brad, and he was working on several things. So he was working on a lot of other things, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. So I'm waiting for what the decision is going to take place there. So we are hoping it's good news. I'm hoping it's good news for you, because I really want this to happen.
Okay, so my point in bringing this back up was maybe we should make a resolution, but maybe we should wait until another month, until next month's meeting, and we'll talk to you, Jennifer, and to Sheena, and we see what happens. And then if we need a resolution in March, we'll write a resolution asking the commissioner to please look after this for us, that it needs to be completed.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, they've committed verbally to it, the small details, but they're actually written. So I appreciate that, but I don't want to waste your time with a resolution if it ends up happening.
Okay. Thank you.
Makes sense. Any other new business, Felice?
I don't have any other new business. How about you, Barry?
I have no old business either. I have one piece of business. Let's adjourn.
Sounds great.
Anyone objecting to adjourning the meeting? Not a sound, not a hand, not a voice. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you all in March, and have a good evening.